This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Survivors of the terror attack in Somalia's capital narrate their ordeal. A sigh of relief in South Africa as relaxed anti-coronavirus measures begin in a matter of hours. And diplomats from the recently closed Chinese Consulate General in Houston arrive in Beijing. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi, and for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Penina, who has our business headlines. Penina.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Business, the African Union commissions the Africa Continental Free Trade Area headquarters in Accra, Ghana. And companies in South Africa struggling to convince their boards and shareholders not to hold off investment plans. I'll have details of those stories and plenty more in just a bit. For now, it's back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Penina. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. Let's begin in Somalia, where security forces have ended a near 5-hour siege by Islamic extremists at a beachside hotel in the capital, Mogadishu. Police say they have killed all attackers and rescued dozens of people who were trapped inside the elite hotel. It's the second attack in just 2 weeks in the capital.
The elite hotel in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, was the target of Saturday's attack. The establishment is popular with government officials. Gunmen blew up a car loaded with explosives before they forced their way inside and took hostages. The hostages included young men and women who were dining there.
The terrorists gained access into the hotel. There were 16 people who were killed in the attack. There were 11 civilians and 5 attackers who were neutralized during the attack. Also, more than 13 people were injured. Most of those killed or wounded are the hotel staff.
I was part of those trapped inside the hotel yesterday. I was at the mosque when the blast happened. Everyone was looking for an escape route. I sustained slight wounds, but my friend was unfortunately killed.
The militant group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for the attack. The group seeking to topple the government has been carrying out a series of attacks in the country.
Whatever happened last night and whatever has happened in the recent days and other incidences in the country will continue to happen if the government does not build strong government institutions to protect security, stability, unity, economic development and social services.
Over the past several years, the Somalia government has been working with the African Union forces to combat Al-Shabaab. Chaumrono, CGTN.
South Sudan's government says a disarmament program will go ahead despite clashes between armed civilians and the army. Fighting has left 150 people dead in the northern part of the country. Patrick Oyet has the details.
South Sudan's government says calm has now returned to a rat state where its forces clashed with civilians. The country's police insist that disarming civilians across the country will have to continue to stop intercommunal clashes.
It is something that we are tackling as a government, as a country, as a security, but I can assure you that we are not going to kill our own citizens. These are our people that we are commanding them here in Juba, so we are not here so that we can be able to kill them.
South Sudan's Bureau for Small Arms Control says years of civil war, some fought along tribal lines, have littered the country with firearms. The result is increased intercommunal violence this year. Juba says disarming the civilians is the only durable solution to the problem. The African Union body mandated to monitor South Sudan's peace deal, known as Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, disagrees.
Disarmament takes time and may not be the solution in the short term. There is need for political will of the communities involved. Disputes should be resolved by dialogue and not violence or fighting.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan says 5,000 people are now displaced from the area where clashes occurred in Warab State, but that's not the only cause for concern.
Concerning are also the increased tensions and intercommunal violence in different parts of the country. These developments threaten peace and stability.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan says it has set up a temporary peacekeeping base in Tonj East, Warab State, to deter potential fresh attacks. The UN further says it began patrolling and has held numerous meetings with the local authorities, the military, community leaders and youth in Warab State to support reconciliation efforts. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Turkey and Qatar's defense ministers have been visiting the Libyan capital, Tripoli. The ministers came to observe operations under a military cooperation deal with Libya. The German foreign minister also joined the two for talks with Libyan officials. Turkey and its regional ally, Qatar, support the Tripoli-based government of national accord. Turkey provided crucial military support to help the GNA stave off a 14-month assault from rival forces based in eastern Libya earlier this year. South Africans are counting down to midnight local time when relaxed measures against the coronavirus pandemic take effect. The downgrade to a level 2 lockdown ends a controversial ban on the sale of alcohol and cigarettes and fully reopens the tourism sector. Angela Coppola has more.
The country has breathed a collective sigh of relief following the announcement. The tourism and hospitality sectors are especially happy. While international travel is still banned, domestic travel is allowed.
We know it's going to be tough because people don't have money. A lot of jobs have been lost. And we know that the road to recovery, at least it starts now with the opening of full domestic travel. But it will be a tough road ahead. And a lot of people don't have money to travel.
The government has been criticized for having lots of economic recovery plans, but there's a lack of implementation capacity. But that could change.
We've made available, basically made an offer to them that we do have skills in the private sector, and the skills is available to assist government, because this is not only the government's problem, it's a problem for the country.
There's another issue that's receiving attention, the trade in illicit cigarettes during the lockdown, which has cost the government about $80 million in taxes. Getting people to stop may be a tough ask, given the 40% unemployment rate.
We're calling on members of the public not to support the so-called cheaper brands where the taxes are being avoided. You are part of a criminal syndicate if you are not going to be paying your taxes, and that is why we're calling on South Africans to make sure that they pay their taxes.
Those taxes could have been used to assist the less privileged. Meanwhile, the biggest employer in South Africa is the tourism sector, and it's important that the sector gets its COVID-19 protocols right.
We want to show the world that we're ready to welcome the world, because the next phase is to deal with international inbound. So we have to make sure that when we do tourism now, we do it in a way that will instill trust, with the international markets.
There's a lot more activity happening on the streets around Johannesburg. Now it's time to see if that's sustainable and at the right level to give us that economic growth that we need. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
As Sudan marks 1 year of a power-sharing deal, our correspondent Robert Nagila looks back at key milestones leading up to this point.
We begin in April 2019 when President Omar al-Bashir steps down after nearly 30 years in power following months of protests. In August 2019, Sudan's military and civilian leaders formally sign a power-sharing deal. And later that month, Bashir goes on trial on corruption-related charges. In September 2019, a new government under Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok takes office. And in December, Bashir is sentenced to 2 years in a social reform facility over corruption-related charges. In February 2020, Khartoum agrees to compensate the families of U.S. sailors killed in an al-Qaeda attack on a U.S. destroyer in Yemen in the year 2000. And later that month, Sudan announces it will hand over Bashir to the International Criminal Court to face genocide and war crime charges. In March 2020, Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok survives an assassination attempt in Khartoum. And in May, Sudan appoints its first ambassador to the United States after more than 20 years. In July 2020, former President Omar al-Bashir goes on trial over a 1989 coup that brought him to power. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Let's turn our attention to Beijing now, where the diplomats of the Chinese Consulate General in Houston have just returned to China. The consulate was closed last month after the U.S. government ordered it to end all operations. In response, China asked Washington to shut its consulate general in Chengdu. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi welcomed the consulate staff at the Beijing airport. He publicly thanked them for their diligence in protecting Chinese best interests.
All of our colleagues at the Consulate General in Houston remained calm in the emergency when the U.S. violated the basic principles of international relations and ordered the closure of the consulate. All of you have kept in mind that you were entrusted by our nation and people and fulfilled your duties as diplomats. At a very difficult and even dangerous situation, you firmly safeguarded China's core interests, the dignity of the state, and the legitimate rights of the consulate.
Israel's President Reuven Rivlin has invited the UAE's Crown Prince to visit Jerusalem as the two countries move to normalize relations. In a letter, President Reuven Rivlin praised the role of Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed in achieving what he called a noble and courageous deal. The agreement brokered by the United States drew anger and dismay in much of the Arab world and Iran. The Palestinians called it a betrayal. A senior Palestinian official condemned the Israeli invitation. A top-level Arab visit could be politically explosive given Jerusalem's internationally disputed status. And let's turn our attention now to Mauritius, where tugboats are starting to drag a detached part of the Japanese cargo ship that ran aground last month. The damaged vessel, which spewed oil into Mauritian waters, split into two on Saturday. Mauritius officials say moving the entire ship is likely to take months. Tuli Shabalala has those developments.
The MV Wakashio has been grounded off the coast of Mauritius for over 3 weeks. At least 1,000 tons of the oil it was carrying has already spilled into the Indian Ocean. To make matters worse, the ship broke into two on Saturday afternoon. Some of its parts are above the water, while others sank in the reefs. The next task for workers will be to tow the front part of the ship hundreds of miles into the sea, where they plan to sink it. But if the bad weather continues, it will delay efforts to move the ship. The island's National Crisis Committee says there is still approximately 30 cubic meters of oil left in the ship's engine room. Coral and marine life remain endangered.
The wildlife has been affected there because we have a lot of sensitive areas there. We have Blue Bay Marine Park, we have L'Île aux Secrets, we have other places which has been affected. They are very sensitive areas. So a lot of work that was discussed in the morning, how we are going to cleanse it in the first place and then rehabilitate it over the months and years. Because that's going to take a long time to get rid of the oil, but the rehabilitation is going to take quite a bit of time, and we have been discussing this with all the different experts from overseas.
To prevent against further oil contamination, booms and oil skimmers have been installed to try and protect vulnerable coastal sites. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
India has sent technical equipment and a team of specialists to Mauritius to help local authorities deal with an oil spill from a Japanese ship. Part of the Indian dispatch is over 30 tons of technical equipment and 10 Coast Guard personnel trained in oil spill containment measures. India answered the call for assistance by the Mauritius government. Scientists said this is the island's worst ecological disaster. The full impact of the oil spill is still unfolding. The damage could affect Mauritius and its tourism-dependent economy for decades. You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Time now for a short break. Here's a look at what's ahead. Africa under COVID-19, our special series looking at how African nations are coping with the pandemic.
taking care of COVID-19 patient, there is always that anxiety.
Handling money is very dangerous.
Wearing of masks has become the new normal for some of them while performing.
Since the ban of alcohol in South Africa, I don't have a job.
Since I'm sitting on this particular table with great people, can each one of you give me one advice that I will mark it by heart and I will remember it for 10 years?
The road of entrepreneurship is going to be tough as you scale your business. But what you shouldn't forget is you take care of your family. Because if your family is happy, then they will support you.
As you build, you take into account the diversity of Africa and the world. This core to your business is skills.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The coronavirus pandemic has impacted many industries in Africa, from transportation and education to the food and beverage industry. To try and stay afloat, many businesses have been adapting to new ways of working. But this has caused unprecedented disruptions to economies and labor markets. Today, we begin our special series focusing on how the continent is coping with the pandemic. Nigeria has strict guidelines on how to maintain social distancing on public transport. Drivers and passengers must wear face masks, and the popular yellow buses are only allowed to carry passengers at 60% capacity. But just how well do operators and the public follow these rules? Deji Badmus finds out.
Nothing better reflects the level of non-compliance with the COVID-19 guidelines for public transportation in Lagos than this commercial bus. By the guidelines, it shouldn't have more than one passenger on the front seat and two on the three rear seats. But all of that is put aside. It's virtually the same story for every other bus in this bus stop. It's simply business as usual. The picture hardly reflecting a city that is the epicenter of COVID-19 in Nigeria.
But at the end of the day, what we have at the back of our mind is that the money we want to make.
See, the most important thing is this nose mask. I believe this thing is not a hairball. You know, it's like saliva. But I believe that when you cover your nose properly, there is nothing like COVID-19 can catch you.
But not all are wearing a face mask, including bus conductors who shout at the top of their voice to call passengers to the bus, dispersing droplets in the process, something medical experts say is highly risky.
COVID is an airborne and droplet disease. So with that being an airborne and droplet disease, as they shout out the amount of viruses that come out, they're not going the 2 meter distance, the social distance they're supposed to keep. So the other person beside them can actually just take that one in. And before you know it, that one also comes down with the virus. So them not wearing the face mask poses a great threat to their passengers, to their family, and even to the environment at large.
But some passengers don't seem bothered by the situation.
This COVID-19, for me, I don't believe, say, what I did in there.
For me, I don't believe there is COVID-19 because I haven't seen anyone who dies from the disease.
But you're wearing a mask. If you don't believe it, why you
I only wear the mask just to respect the government order.
Government says everybody to wear, so I need to follow wear.
Well, it's pretty obvious that for these drivers and bus conductors,
safety is the least of concerns, and that's the reason why all the guidelines the government has put in place to regulate the transport business is completely flouted here, and nothing happens. Nobody's here to check them. For them, it's basically about the money and nothing else. Dejabadmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The South African government has lifted a ban on the sale of alcohol and tobacco. This means South Africans can drink alcohol at restaurants and bars until 10 p.m. local time. But before this easing, many bartenders were rendered jobless after authorities ordered pubs to shut down. From Cape Town, Travis Andrews reports.
Long Street in Cape Town is arguably the heart of the city's entertainment scene, a strip that attracts locals and international tourists alike. It's since been reduced to a pale shadow of its former self. Alcohol is off limits. Bars and restaurants have shut their doors, and for 27-year-old barman Lubabalo Makunyana, this means no job.
The ban of alcohol has affected me a lot because I've got a family that I need to feed. Then now, since the ban of alcohol is being introduced in South Africa, I don't have a job. I'm not working anymore, and at work we can't do anything because that's when we benefit. When the alcohol is open, that's when things are happening.
Lubabalo usually runs the bar counter at Nom Nom on Long Street, a local Italian-style eatery and bar famous for its pizzas and cold beers. These days, it can only sell food, and customers are far and few between, leaving this popular barman of 7 years desperately in search of casual labor.
I do go and look for work. I do apply online. I send my CVs to various places, but they're looking for experience in their same industry. Because in my industry, it's not easy now to get a job, to get a different job. So now I'm applying to anything.
But his story is one that is replicated throughout the industry. While some wait at home, others are already beginning to move on. There are hundreds of barmen affected by the ban on alcohol sales in the street alone, and many are hoping the impending decision on the extension of the national state of disaster may bring them some reprieve. The liquor industry has been actively engaging with the government on the economic impact the ban has had.
The industry can open safely. We can sell alcohol only for 5 hours or 6 hours a day, each and every day, just to benefit, just to get customers inside the shop, just to eat and drink. Because if we don't sell alcohol, we don't make money at all. The shop can't make money, and then we can't get payments.
For now, though, the fridges are empty and the bars will remain customerless. And for many of the city's bartenders, it's a case of wait and see. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
All right, let's take you back to developments in the Mauritius oil spill disaster. Our correspondent Lou Feifei has been keeping a close eye on the oil spill aftermath. She now joins us live from Mayberg in Mauritius. Lou Feifei, thanks for joining us once again here on Africa Live. Give us the latest that's happening over there.
Hello, Richard. On August the 16th, the Wakashio has finally broken apart into two pieces. The ship, just to give you the context, was about 300 meters long and 50 meters wide. The front part of the ship, known as the bow of the ship, broke loose, and it's actually being towed away as we speak by the tugmaster, by the salvage company. It is going according to plan, nothing unexpected in this respect, that it was not grounded onto the reef. So this part is about, I would say, 270 meters, an approximate length. The vast majority of that ship is now being towed out into the Indian Ocean. It's, as far as we understand now, the latest update that it's 8 nautical miles out to sea beyond the outer limits of the reef. It's heading for a shipping graveyard in the state of Gujarat in India, and it's a company called Alan, and this is where the world's vast majority of ships that are no longer in operation go to rest. And that is the goal. It's very optimistic to assume that it will get there. Many of these ships en route sink into the deep seas. The problem part is the stern of the ship, that is the back of the ship, that's stuck on the coral reefs, and it remains there. Just to put that in context, there's about 30 meters of that stuck on the coral reef, and we've been told that there's still a bit of lubricant oils that's left remaining in there, but because of adverse weather conditions, we're still in an anti-cyclone weather pattern with waves of about 3.5 meters high in that area. It's very difficult to extract that. So to that end, the government, together with the foreign experts, have put extra booms in that whole area, including the Blue Bay Nature Reserve and the Ilozigrit Nature Reserve areas to protect the environment.
All right, Lou Feifei, thanks for that update. We're keeping our fingers crossed for positive developments over there. Talk us through, though, the progress of the cleanup efforts. Lou Feifei?
Well, in fact, the cleanup effort is very much an ongoing effort. In the first few days after the oil spill, what we saw were local volunteers who came out with buckets to scoop up the oil. As of now, most of that surface oil has been removed and extracted. The problem is that the oil, some of them have broken down and have sunken in or become more diluted or trapped on the coastline or under the mangroves. What's happening is that the Vice Prime Minister's office is holding basically a daily national crisis management committee meeting together with the Prime Minister's office, and they are doing this in a concerted effort with all of the foreign experts. As we understand now, there are 97 foreign experts here working jointly to come up with a plan to salvage the ship, but also to come up with a comprehensive cleanup plan. We understand that so far the Ministry of Health and other government ministries have been taking samples, for example, of even the local air pollution and also, of course, of the marine area. So far, they have found no adverse toxic organic compounds, but we understand that this massive sampling efforts of the air, the ocean, and so forth is going to be ongoing.
All right, Lou Feifei, let's leave it there for now.
I can also tell you that as of...
Let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much, Lou Feifei. Thank you for keeping a close eye on that story. That's Lou Feifei speaking to us live from Mauritius. Now, with schools around the world shut due to COVID-19, parents have been struggling to keep their children learning. In one of Kenya's informal settlements, 2 children have found a way to keep themselves busy while spreading awareness about the pandemic. Chao Mgono has the story.
Habari? Nzuri sana. Uko poa? Niko poa. I am Milan Odora. I am cameraman from Kibera. My name is Rigan Ochieng and I am a young reporter.
These are not your ordinary journalists. Their tools are made of clay.
I once saw a guy with a camera and this got me excited. I told my friend that we could make clay-made gadgets as well.
Coronavirus is a serious issue and there's need to educate the masses. So I told my friend Regan, we go around interviewing people.
How do you protect yourself from the coronavirus?
We try fighting the coronavirus by wearing masks and washing our hands regularly.
Children like Regan and Milan are among those impacted by the pandemic.
It is very difficult to keep children safe and busy during this pandemic.
But their parents say they can still play a meaningful role in influencing behavior change.
During this pandemic, I'll support them a lot because at least I can see that, yes, they are not going to school, but at least they're doing something good for the community.
Like other informal settlements, Kibera's cramped conditions increase the chances of spreading the coronavirus.
The only fear that I have is that most of the adults are somehow arrogant, some are drunkards, so you don't know what they might end up encountering there.
So what message do Milan and Regan have for their community?
Observe social distancing, wear masks, sanitize, and wash your hands.
I am Regan Ochieng. I am reporting about coronavirus in Kibera.
Time now to hand over to Penina for the latest in business news. Penina.
Thank you, Richard. Coming up on Africa Live Business. The African Union commissions the Africa Continental Free Trade Area headquarters in Accra, Ghana. And companies in South Africa struggling to convince their boards and shareholders not to hold off investment plans.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat has been launched in Accra, Ghana. The ceremony was previously scheduled for the end of March, but was derailed by the coronavirus pandemic. The building will serve as the headquarters for the world's largest free trade pact, bringing together 54 of the African Union's 55 members. Eritrea is the only country on the continent yet to sign the deal, but it has expressed willingness to do so after studying and understanding it. The bloc brings together over 1.3 billion people and an economy in excess of $3.4 trillion. Amkele Mene from South Africa will serve as the first Secretary General, having been appointed in February this year. The Trade Pact is expected to be implemented from January 1st, 2021, after a 6-month postponement, again due to disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic. South Africa enters its 5th month of lockdown. Companies are struggling to convince their boards and shareholders that investment plans shouldn't be put on hold. The alcohol industry is a case in point. In recent days, 2 multinational alcohol manufacturers have confirmed that their investment expansion plans have been shelved or cancelled. Angela Kopla looks at Consulate Glass.
The unintended consequences of the lockdown reaches up and down their value chain. In this case, it meant that Consul Glass has had to shelve its investment and maintenance plans valued at between $150 and $200 million. It's been devastating.
It's very difficult. We were in a growth phase. We'd seen good tailwinds for glass. There's been a swing out of plastic, and we had growth in non-alcoholic sectors. In fact, food and soft drinks and some very positive trends. There was a shortage of glass at the end of last year. And we were hoping to repatriate some filled imports into South Africa. There are a couple of products that have brought into South Africa filled, and people are looking at local filling. So, we were in a very good space, growing, about to employ people. We contracted with a number of our international suppliers, and we had to get on the phone and cancel all of these orders.
The company runs 11 furnaces, and some were due for $30 million worth of refurbishment.
We put that on hold for now. Not really a problem, because clearly most of our customer base is not producing at the moment. But that's another way for us to try and close this gap that's come about in terms of our cash flows, given the fact that we've suddenly lost our customers overnight. And it's very difficult given the fact that furnaces are designed to run continuously. So they consume a lot of cash and energy, and keeping them hot while not making bottles consumes a lot of cash. So we've had to defer the cash on rebuilding facilities and keep some of these facilities down as well.
Businesses need transparency and insights into government decisions because it affects their budget planning.
Hope that we'll get clarity from government very quickly so that we can go ahead and commit to these additional, the current footprint. And this is really the problem, is the lack of certainty. We have to make very big decisions. The lead time on materials are long. You're taking a lot of your capital that you want to preserve your business's cash flow, and you're putting it into act. But if you don't do it in time, then the market's going to be short of glass and we're going to import glass. And that's bad for us, and it's also bad for our supply chain.
The situation is critical for suppliers to the company, like the 4,000 recyclers that return used glass to the plant.
We've had to suspend purchases again. We did help with a grant. We put a couple of million rand into that supply chain in the last lockdown, but I mean, we're getting into trouble ourselves now. And we've taken out more than 20 million rand a month from these people, and they're informal. They don't have UIF, they don't have support structures, they don't have banks.
The unintended consequences of the extended lockdown and not consulting with business is that jobs have been lost and many businesses have closed permanently. It doesn't all go well for a recovery of an economy already under extreme pressure. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The Central Bank of the Democratic Republic of Congo has raised the main interest rate to 18.5% from 7.5%. The regulator had lowered the rate from 9% in March in order to cushion the economy from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The latest rate hike was carried out to re-anchor inflation expectations. Year-on-year inflation in the country stood at over 14% at the end of July, around 10 percentage points higher than at the same point last year. The central bank had previously said it expects the economy to contract 2.4% this year, compared with growth of over 4% in 2019, partly due to coronavirus-linked disruptions to mining. Tunisia's budget deficit in 2020 will be about 7% of GDP, compared with 3% expected previously due to the outbreak of COVID-19. While the government ended all restrictions on movement and businesses and opened its sea, land and air borders in late June, the impact of the pandemic cannot be underestimated. The economy is projected to shrink 6.5%. Here's Adnan Shawashi with the rest of the details.
The budget deficit in Tunisia soared to 3.8 billion dinars, equivalent to $1.4 billion in the first half of 2020, against 2.4 billion dinars, about $903 million in 2019, as shown by results of the state budget execution. This is due to the North African state's own resources dropping 11.9% compared to 18.3% rise in the first 6 months of 2019.
The first 6 months of 2020 were extremely difficult compared to the same period in 2019. Tax revenues plunged by around 12%. The drop is seen in revenues from direct taxes and indirect taxes. Direct corporate tax revenues fell 18.7% after posting a 40.3% rise last year. Indirect taxes saw considerable decrease, mainly with VAT receipts reducing by 15.5% and other indirect taxes dropping by 13%.
The governor of the Central Bank of Tunisia explained that the outstanding public debt has increased to $32 billion at the end of June 2020, up 8.3% compared to its level at the end of December 2019. The bank forecasts growth this year to shrink to 6.5%.
The most affected sectors are the tourism, transport, airline and maritime business, as well as other domains which are tied up to tourism. The agriculture, food and service sectors, especially exporting companies, are also suffering because the European Union is their first partner and the EU itself is facing an economic crisis due to the pandemic.
Tunisia's industrial minister noted that 360 small and medium-sized enterprises operating in the automotive and aeronautics sectors and which had been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic will benefit from a new support program.
Before the pandemic, some companies had confirmed orders until 2025, but the crisis hit the vital industrial and economic sectors. Several export-oriented industries lost 100% of their activity in less than 2 months. The recovery will be hard without state intervention.
The Minister of Finance announced that the bill relating to the support of economic revival, the integration of the informal sector and the fight against tax evasion was adopted by a ministerial council and submitted to the House of the People's Representatives. The objective of this bill is to support economic enterprises and help them gradually resume the pace of their activities. A recent study published by the National Institute of Statistics has revealed that up to 35% of the private sector companies, especially SMEs, could close down permanently due to the negative impact of the coronavirus crisis. Authorities say that over 100,000 people could lose their jobs if a second wave of COVID-19 hits the country in September. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
In Somalia, SMEs have been battered by restrictions imposed in order to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Many have been forced to close, while others are scaling down operations and laying off staff. The sector is trying to pivot to online sales in order to remain afloat. Somalia's federal government adopted short-term measures in April to try and mitigate economic damage by the pandemic. That includes a 100% tax exemption for commodities like rice and dates and a 50% tax waiver for wheat flour and cooking oil. The remittance lifeline that sustains over 40% of Somalis has also steeply contracted.
The pandemic unexpectedly affected our operations in various sectors, including finance, offices, flights, and most importantly, our annual plan on Hajj and Umrah, which picked our flight tickets.
Businesses depend on the number of customers, mainly restaurants, that provide food and drinks. Following the COVID-19 outbreak and health guidelines, the number has greatly reduced due to the fear of the people on social gatherings.
Japan, the world's third largest economy, has suffered its worst contraction on record in the second quarter as the coronavirus pandemic crushed consumption and exports. Official data show that Japan's GDP fell nearly 28% between April and June, the biggest quarterly drop since the government's comparable data became available in the 1980s. The latest drop has wiped out the benefits brought by the government's stimulus policies adopted 7 years ago. Now for a look at China's digital economy, China UnionPay, tech firm Baidu, and the fintech-focused AI bank have jointly issued China's first ever digital bank card. The card, released over the weekend with the approval of the People's Bank of China, combines the functions of debit and credit cards. Users can apply for and activate the card and make payments on Baidu's smartphone app. There is an immediate credit line of 50,000 yuan or about $7,200. Cash withdrawals still require a trip to the bank. The AI bank card has no physical form. Anti-fraud measures include text message verification and facial recognition. The system freezes an account once it detects any unusual behavior. Meanwhile, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce also said it would continue to test the state-backed digital currency. Testing is being conducted using 2022 Beijing Winter Games scenarios, as well as in cities that are leading digital economic growth in China's 4 regions. Officials say that the government might expand the program in those regions if the testing goes well. Here's an explanation of how state-backed digital currency is different from the existing online payment methods.
PBOC officials state that the digital renminbi is an encrypted currency or cryptocurrency. It's government-backed legal tender in a digital form and could eventually replace the renminbi cash that's in circulation. That's what makes the digital renminbi different from Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies.
The digital RMB and banknotes can be exchanged at equal values. We are not injecting any more money in circulation. To get the new digital RMB, commercial banks and individuals must exchange with the money they have, whether it's in cash or bank deposits.
Banknotes will remain in circulation in our country for a very long time. People are used to different payment methods, so cash and no cash payments would coexist.
Meanwhile, the central bank doesn't charge any fees for digital renminbi transactions. People can use their digital money with the Digital Currency Electronic Payment App or DCEP wallets. The DCEP wallets support transactions without any network or cell phone signals.
Transactions between two smartphones will be done with a touch. That's all, as long as you have DCEP wallets on your phone.
So how do digital renminbi and DCEP wallets differ from existing payment apps? PBOC officials say the money on apps like Alipay and WeChat Pay is actually transferred from bank deposits, while digital renminbi is completely independent of any bank accounts.
Well, that's it for now, but later on Global Business, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat has been commissioned in Accra, Ghana. However, a lot remains to be done to realize the January 1st, 2021 implementation date. We'll look at the roadmap. That's at the top of the hour, and I shall see you then. For now, it's back to you, Richard.
Thanks a lot, Panina. The news continues on Africa Live. We will see you on the other side of the break with a lot more news. Here's a look at what's ahead. In Tunisia, an entrepreneur opens a hotel to provide food, medical assistance, and entertainment for pets.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's turn our attention to Tunisia, where an entrepreneur has opened the country's first hotel for pets. Yes, you heard correct. Owners who travel can leave their pets at the hotel. Food, medical assistance, as well as entertainment is provided. Adnan Shawashi has the story.
Rahma Haddet is a Tunisian civil society and animal rights activist. She has invested all her savings in this first pet house and hotel for animals in the North African country.
Booking is possible online or over the phone. This hotel is like a human space. It's made up of beauty salon and a spa. Food is available a la carte or at the restaurant. A pet shop sells all animal feeds. I've created spacious suites for small and big dogs, as well as cats and kittens. The dog can be housed indoors or outdoors. It depends on the owner's budget.
This project is extraordinary. It gathers volunteers, veterinarians and animal lovers who care about animal welfare.
The first clients have welcomed this alternative accommodation for their pets. Some 20 animals are already on the waiting list.
I often travel abroad. I can't take my dog on all trips. This hotel facilitates my life and my dog's life. I can leave the dog here instead of leaving him alone at home.
A group of Tunisian parliamentarians led by the MP Yassine Al-Ayari are working on a bill entitled Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act. MPs are working with activists at the Pet House Hotel to change the legislation.
We are working hand in hand along with activists to prepare a journal of animal rights. The project will criminalize any mistreatment or torture of animals.
The Pet House Hotel includes a special section which is dedicated to free animal adoption. A refuge has been created to protect hundreds of dogs and cats from the dangers of the streets. Many Tunisians have welcomed the Pet House initiative. The success of this first hotel for animals has inspired other animal lovers and associations to create similar facilities in many regions across the North African country. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Stay with us on Africa Live because we've got your sports news coming up in just a moment. Here's a peek at that headline. We have Europa League showdown as Inter Milan and Shakhtar fight for remaining spot in the finals.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find